So the other night, I got home from a long day of work. I started to notice that I'm getting some nasty cold symptoms, and I decided to stay up late against my better judgment to wait for this game to preload. And when it finally finished, I got this error. Now, the interesting thing about that error is that everything it's telling me is a complete and utter lie. It says that my RAM does not meet the minimum specifications for running Call of Duty, and that is wrong. This game has what are probably the highest system requirements on the market right now, and that is just ridiculous. They unfairly lock out users who should be able to run this game. If you're getting this error, and if you're taking these system requirements at face value, then you are being lied to. Infinity Ward or Activision, either one of them, are for some reason coming up with fabrications about how demanding this game is, and they're implementing this error message to lock out customers who should be able to play it. How can I prove that claim? Well, it's actually pretty easy. Someone made a modified exe that you just drop into the game's folder, and there you go. The game starts up as normal as it should, and once you get into it, it runs fine. For all intents and purposes, it looks okay and it runs okay, and that 6GB RAM requirement is not much of a requirement after all. There are some issues with crashes that can be very easily cured, but keep in mind that I've made it through the whole campaign like this. I mean, usually if you don't meet some kind of arbitrary or unrealistic requirements, a game at least gives you a chance to run it, but for some reason they really don't want me playing this. And check this out, this is the real kicker. Since I have it in windowed mode, I can slide us over to the task manager and see how many gigs of RAM are actually being used, and that's definitely not 6 gigs. I have 4 gigabytes of RAM, Windows is using about 1 of those, and the game is using about 2. So there's a whole gigabyte of RAM just sitting around that's not being used at all. And when I'm not recording, it looks like I'm getting a smooth 30 to 50 FPS. Which is not optimal, but it's comfortably playable, and this is with everything maxed out at 2x anti-aliasing except for texture detail, which for some reason keeps resetting itself back to normal no matter how many times I try to ramp it up. On some of the bigger and more outdoorsy levels, I did start to see some stuttering that would lead to crashing while still maintaining that high base frame rate. And, you know, that's the kind of symptom that sounds an awful lot like what you get from having low RAM. But after a good deal of trial and error, I eventually found out that the one option that was crashing the game is one that doesn't seemingly have a lot to do with the size of the game data being processed. It's actually terrain detail which causes these crashes. It basically turns tessellation on and off for the terrain. It's a pretty subtle effect that can be easily lived without, and I don't even know if it has anything to do with RAM or not, but once I turned it off, the whole game played out lovely. Also, remember all that talk about the 50GB install? That was all lies too. The official requirements ask for 40GB, but it's really more like 33. So keep all that in mind. I've been playing with everything as maxed out as it'll let me, with some anti-aliasing on top, and for the most part I got very decent performance. And this is on a machine that doesn't even meet the minimum requirements. I haven't upgraded this thing in 3 years and it still plays games pretty well. And while all of this may sound like a petty and awfully specific concern, this isn't really something we should be tolerating. It's a ridiculous move on the company's part that is both dishonest and foolish. Of course, lying to customers is always going to be bad for PR, but this is also going to have a tangible, solid effect on the game's short-term early sales as well. Take a look at this. These are results from the Steam hardware survey from October, and it shows that 54% of Steam users have less than 6GB of RAM, so they're locking out the majority of eligible customers while also depreciating the value of that purchase for those who know how to bypass that arbitrary requirement. See, that modified executable file I was talking about was actually made by people intending to pirate the game and play it without Steam. Inside the archive, along with the exe, are several DLLs meant for emulating Steam, and there isn't a modified exe for the multiplayer version of the game, which, in typical CoD fashion, is a separate file. But even if there was one, I wouldn't really be eager to load it up. Seeing as how it would be a modified executable for the multiplayer portion of the game, I'm guessing that I'd be running a big risk for getting falsely flagged by whatever anti-cheating system they're using this time. Since I've already gotten one false positive from Valve anti-cheat in the past, I don't have much faith in these things. But as far as getting through the single player, I don't see how I have much of a choice. So I can't fairly say how well the performance of the multiplayer game would be if you have less than 6GB, but it's the same visual assets on smaller maps with less big scripted spectacles, so I don't see how performance could get much worse. Either way, that doesn't change the fact that it's a dishonest requirement to begin with, and they could have easily at least unlocked the single player from that requirement. And in response to this news, I see a lot of people saying that RAM is cheap and that everyone should have more than 6 gigs anyway, but remember that survey. The majority of Steam users don't, and RAM isn't as cheap as it used to be. A recent factory fire has slowed production, and the increased requirements of these next-gen games are going to increase demand. And you should all know what happens to prices when supply decreases and demand increases. I saw this 6GB requirement a few days before buying the game, and I knew the risks, but I kinda wanted to take that risk because I had a sneaking suspicion that it was gonna be bullshit. Nothing about this game looks like it requires what it says it requires. I can't really say that I'm surprised that those requirements are bullshit, but the fact that they have the audacity to write in a fatal error message blocking people from playing the game without meeting their bullshit requirements is a preposterously overzealous move that treats customers unfairly. I don't know what they're trying to do here. There are some crazy theories about them deliberately unoptimizing their game to drive sales of the console version, or to make cheating harder, or to future-proof customers, but that doesn't justify the lie or disprove just how easy it is to catch them red-handed in this lie. What this decision is going to do is block the majority of their potential customers from purchasing this game, and it's going to manifest even more distrust of this developer and its publisher. So I was gonna take my time to make a well-written and hilarious review of this game, but for now that's just gonna have to be for the campaign only. Black Friday's coming up, and that'll be a good time to finally buy a nice fat 16 gig upgrade, but until then, all I can really do is hope for some kind of official patch that gets rid of that error message. And I'm also gonna cross my fingers and hope that I haven't been put on some kind of cheating blacklist already. After all, I modified a single-player game that I bought to allow me to play it. I can only hope that they won't flag me for that. Until then, all I can hope for is that people will be more informed than what developers and publishers solely tell them. Just remember instances like this one, and maybe someday we can all begin to hold these companies more accountable for the things they lie about.